Hey, what's up guys, you good Gypsy back today with an update for my Splash King FL4K build that I put out about a week ago. We do now have the level cap increased to level 53, so we have a few more skill points to work with, but since I posted my last video, I've been experimenting with some different gear and I've discovered some improvements to the build that bump its damage up to a completely new level. So we're going to jump into that. The main update that I've made to the build in terms of gear is the class mod I'm using. So previously in my Splash King FL4K build, I had this particular Cosmic Stalker that I was using. It provided a shotgun damage boost, which was really good for the Protuberance, as well as the hunt skill boosts of the Cosmic Stalker. I think it's a fantastic class mod. I still maintain that it's one of FL4K's best mobbing tools, but I gotta say, I've discovered the Deadeye and this thing is incredible. This is really what turns this build into a one-shot machine in a lot of mobbing situations, and you have fantastic bossing potential as well with this build. So yeah, we're gonna jump into why the Deadeye is so valuable for this kind of build. The Deadeye com is unique. It's unique among the class mods for the fact that it provides 35% damage boost to enemies above 75% health. You can see it's also giving us +5 into Two Fang, which is really important for this build. You don't have to have a +5, you can get like +4 and still have great success, but you want to have as many points into Two Fang as possible because that's going to increase your likelihood of firing an extra projectile. So with 10 out of 5 into Two Fang, we have a 50% chance every time we shoot to fire an extra projectile, and as you can imagine, that is really useful for guns like the Protuberance, which do shoot like a single projectile that does insane amounts of damage. So if you can double that, you're doubling your damage, as well as all the anointed effects that the rack builds tend to provide. So the Two Fang bonus there is amazing. It also really works well with launches, so launches like the Scourge here, which is what I'm using, the Nukem I'm also interchanging with, the Lump. They all really appreciate that 50% chance to fire an extra shot because you're going to be getting a lot of mileage out of it. Not only that, this Deadeye mod also has splash damage, which does greatly increase the power of the Protuberance here, and it also actually improves the damage of the ricochets from the Wedding Invitation. This is the new sniper that was recently released in the patch with the Broken Hearts DLC. This is probably going to get nerfed. I think it's extremely strong. I wouldn't be surprised if they nerf the damage on it a little bit, but a lot of its damage comes from the ricochets, so I don't know how they're going to do that, given that weapons like the core weapons also have that mechanic built into them, so we'll have to see. But the splash damage is boosted by this Deadeye com, as well as boosting the crit damage. This has Jacob's weapon crit on it. It's not essential, like you really don't need a com that has things to boost the power of the Wedding Invitation. It's that good. You could have a completely neutral com and still tear up with it. Same goes for the Protuberance, but what you do want is a lot of Two Fang skill points just to get that increased likelihood of firing an extra projectile. Now the reason this is so important and this has such a great effect with the Protuberance is that not only are we getting that 35% damage boost against high health enemies, we're getting the additional chance to proc an extra shot. This is going to allow us to build up Overkill bonus, the Guardian rank perk, which is really useful for weapons like launchers and snipers, which deal huge damage and often deal enough damage to easily kill like 3 targets at once. If you're firing like a Protuberance, for example, versus a trash mob, you're going to be seeing insane damage numbers popping up. That's going to be supported by the Deadeye inherent bonus, as well as the Two Fang procking. You're going to be building up lots of overkill, and that's going to lead to kind of like a domino momentum effect, where you're just going to be building up all this excess damage, and every time you shoot, if you can position your shots right, you're going to be getting huge amounts of damage onto your next attack. So it's a lot of fun to use with the Protuberance. I've seen some crazy numbers, 2, 3, even like 5 million damage with this when it's positioned right. I know a lot of people don't necessarily have a Protuberance or they haven't used it. There is a bit of a learning curve with this gun. You do want to shoot it sort of at the feet of the enemy, kind of like how it has a sweet spot similar to the Pimpernel in Borderlands 2. You want to shoot it at the feet of your enemy so that projectiles that spawn out of the initial shot do actually land on the ground, because when they burst forth from the initial projectile, they are going to create splash damage and a splash radius of their own, When Two Fang's proccing, you're getting 2 of those initial orbs, and then 6 subsequent orbs popping out of those 2, so it's a whole lot of damage. And if you can position it right, most enemies just get 1 shot, like I said. So that's the really beautiful synergy between the Deadeye and the Protuberance. This is a weapon that I think deserves a lot more love. Obviously, it works really, really well with the Wedding Invitation, as well as weapons like the Becker. They really appreciate that 2 Fang bonus, and like I mentioned, launchers earlier really help with that. So that is the main sort of change in terms of gear. I want to discuss anointments, because I don't think I really discussed this in my previous video, but elemental anointments on shield and grenade are very important, because I tend to roll with the corrosive Protuberance most of the time. I like to use radiation as the element as at least one of the elements that I'm using on my shield or grenade. This radiation not only synergizes well with corrosive, being able to strip shields, which corrosive tends to struggle with really nicely, but it also creates radiation explosions when you kill enemies. And because you're killing enemies so quickly, you've got so much power, you're killing enemies, that radiation explosion is going to just add to that, spreading to other enemies, and really just fitting in the theme of this Splash King build that we've got going here. The reason I use the Hunter Seeker grenade is that it helps proc a number of Flak's different hunter skills in his hunt tree. So you got Megavore proccing, you've got head count, which is really useful, and it's a really nice way of getting back a bit of ammo, getting back a bit of cooldown, leaving a trace as well. For your racks, I find it just to be one of the most beneficial grenades to use for Flak. And I have radiation anointment on it, but you can always mix and match. I would recommend using radiation with corrosive. When I'm using a radiation Protuberance, I tend to ensure that I have corrosive on there, just to kind of mix and match depending on what you're facing. For the second element, you can really use anything. I use cryo. I've had great experience with cryo. I do tend to switch it up to fire 2. Fire 2 has really solid results, but for the most part, cryo is what I tend to use when I'm mobbing the slaughter shaft. That is a great place to find level 53 gear now, if you guys are looking. A lot of the gear, people are worried a lot of their gear is going to become redundant now that the level cap hit has increased, but I'm still using level 50 Protuberance and it's tearing up. So it's actually funny, the 35% damage bonus provided by the Deadeye offsets the level penalty of 50 versus 53 enemies, funnily enough. So it's kind of a nice way of looking at it, but yeah, you don't need level 53 gear to tear up with this build. So let's talk about some other splash weapons you can use, because not everyone is going to have a Protuberance. I know they are hard to come by, especially ones with this particular anointment, which is what you're going to be wanting to look for. So other splash weapons you can use, alternatives to the Protuberance, something that I really enjoy using is the Trevinator. This is going to chew through ammo a lot, so you're going to want to either have a cut purse available, or you're going to want to have access to some sort of ammo regen, whether it's just using the ammo crates in the slaughter shaft or using some kind of ammo regeneration method. But the Trevinator is fantastic. It's a really great sort of splash close-up weapon that you can get huge damage out of. You can get all kinds of different anointments on it. The rack anointment works really well with it. I've got another down here, I think, that has the splash anointment. This is fantastic. Really works well with the build. Has a lot of splash damage firing out, a lot of projectiles going out at once, so I definitely recommend that. Other options are the Kibsworth, which are fantastic. Kibsworth are really good, obviously on most characters, but they work really nicely on Flak and the rack attack variant, and splash variants also do fantastic work with this build. Devil's Forcing you can use, pretty underrated gun I reckon, kind of better on Mo's, but definitely works with Flak. Recursion is obviously going to work really well on this kind of build. I tend to not use it because I don't know. I find it kind of trivializing a little bit too much, but certainly give this a crack on a splash build. It's gonna do wonders. Ideally, you want to look for one with rack attack or bonus element on the next 2 magazines. That's going to create more ricochets with this weapon. Really strange mechanic, but that's where we're at with this gun. You can use the head explosion if you don't have the Wedding Invitation. The Wedding Invitation is the best sniper in the game at the moment, but if this gets nerfed, which it probably will, who knows what its future is going to look like. I think it's still going to be top tier, but if you don't have a Wedding Invitation or you don't want to use it for some reason, I would recommend the head explosion. This particular gun on this kind of build really benefits from the splash damage. The initial shot is splash as far as I understand. as are the ricochets. So that's really going to benefit from Two Fang, as well as Deadeye, as well as the splash bonuses of this build. So other launching options, you've got of course the ion cannon, which is going to just wipe everything on the map, but some really fun launches to use are the Nukem. The Nukem as well as lumps are something I really recommend on this build. I've been having a lot of fun with the Scourge. I'm just using this at the moment because it is really nice for clearing mobs. It's also a great mobbing bossing tool as well, so that's something to consider there. And you can use the Fl4k as well to get some nice close proximity splash damage off, but for the most part I tend to run with the Protuberance. It's just so much fun to use, and I'm going to show you guys some gameplay with this particular setup on wave 5 of the Slaughter Shaft on True Hunter mode Mayhem 4. As far as the shield goes, shield and relic combo, on a build like this, you are focused on damage. Like, this is a really fun, really aggressive playstyle. I really can't recommend the stopgap and the last stand more. Last stand auto idle in particular is going to provide you with some really great sustain. That's something Fl4k struggles with on most of his builds, unless you're running a Gamma Burst build, so you are really going to want that combo of last stand and the stopgap, in my opinion. Alternatives to the stopgap would be stuff like the recharge or the transformer. Nice defensive shields, even the backham's okay with Fl4k, but I find that 5-second immunity phase on the stopgap to be just amazing for Fl4k's longevity. It can allow you to trade damage with really tough enemies, which can sometimes be the difference between you going down and you killing the enemy. So having that 5 seconds as well as the 5 seconds on the last stand is pretty vital. So you're going to want to look for this kind of, I mean, these rolls are perfect for a Protuberance build, shotgun damage, area of effect damage, and mag size, but you don't need to have these god rolls. If you can, find area of effect damage. That is probably the most important of these 3 rolls. Mag size does help. It can allow you to squeeze an extra shot out of your launches in a lot of cases. Shotgun damage is a nice bonus, but honestly, given the amount of overkill damage we're building up with this kind of build, Two Fang, it's not essential. You don't need to have this to have success with the build, but find yourself a last stand auto idle if you can. They do have a lot of uses on this kind of build, so that is going to be the build. In terms of the skill points that I added to this build with the recent level cap increase, I pumped points into pack tactics here. Some people do tend to enjoy shared spirit on a rack build, but I gotta say, personally for me, I prefer to keep my pet up at all times. I like the passive bonuses that it provides, and when your pet goes down, you actually lose this 45% damage increase. So I'm not about that. I prefer to keep my pet alive with Who Rescued Who. We're dealing so much damage that the pet is going to be regenning 5% of the damage we're dealing, which is a lot of health. That's a lot of health, considering we're getting like millions of damage off. In a lot of these situations, the pet's going to stay nice and healthy, and if you use shared spirit, a lot of the time your pet is going to go down as a result. So it can be useful. If you're struggling to stay alive, I definitely recommend investing in this, but personally for me, I prefer to have DPS on my side and be able to bring myself up if I do go down through the last stand and stopgap. If I manage to go down, I've got plenty of ways to get back up. There's plenty of ways in this game you can get back up out of second wind. You can just use an ion cannon. If you're really struggling, you should be able to get back up with ease with that. But the Protuberance is fantastic for me, so I prefer to pump the points into DPS and a bit more health. So those are the changes. One of the most fundamental skills, like I mentioned, is Two Fang. It's rarely used on high projectile count builds, but on builds like this that use low projectile count weapons with high damage, Two Fang is essential. So that is going to be the build. This is my Guardian rank. We're going to pause it here and segue into some gameplay. Now, after the gameplay, I'm going to jump into how you can actually make this build even more insane using one different piece of gear. So stick around for that if you do want to see. I hope you guys enjoy the gameplay and give this build a try. It is a lot of fun to use, and I'll catch you soon.
to death. She will appreciate it.
You are the heart's breaker. Maurice is the heart's taker. They go into the bag. Maurice hopes his own heart will be broken with such artistry. Someday.
Distract them. Another broken heart. Maurice is fearingly pleased. Composition suits you. Send you all to death. Watch out for this, big badass! Gang righteous!
Alright guys, so hopefully you enjoyed that gameplay there. It is a lot of fun to use. As you can see, it's extremely powerful and it's very fun, aggressive sort of gameplay loop to use, so definitely give it a try. If you can find yourself a Protuberance, you can have a lot of fun with this kind of build. You just need to find yourself a good Deadeye with as many points into Two Fang as you can get. If you want to improve the damage on this build, if you want to take it to new levels, which really just trivialize the game, just for a bit of fun, then you can actually switch up your shield and use the Band of Sitorak. Now, this is a level 5 shield, and there is a way you can get low level gear. You just have to have a co-op. You have to have like one of your mules in on a second controller as co-op, be farming together, and then the drops in that game can end up in the mule's lost loot, which you can go and get. To actually farm Sitorak, the Band of Sitorak, you need to go and farm the Juggernaut enemy in the unstoppable enemy over in Eden 6 in the Abamaya. So make sure you go and check that out if you do want to find one of these. But the reason you want a low level one is because the way this works is every time the shield depletes, it stacks the bonuses of weapon damage and movement speed. So you can actually stack indefinitely which is pretty absurd with his shield. You obviously have no survivability, that's why you're going to want to pair it with a last stand relic. But what it means is you can zip around the maps really fast. Your damage is insane, and the only way you lose the stacks is if the shield is prevented from recharging fully. So because it has such a small capacity, it should recharge really quickly. But if you get afflicted by like a status effect, some sort of damage over time, elemental damage, you will sometimes reset the stacks because the shield cannot regen before it takes a tick of that dot damage. So that's something to keep in mind. I know not everyone is into using level 5 shields, and this is definitely not needed for the build. This is just purely overkill, but it is really fun. It is a fun way of getting a lot out of weapons like the Hive, the Lump, and the Scourge. I'm just going to show you guys quickly on Athena just some gameplay of using the Hive with a lot of stacks of this band of Sitorak built up. So this is going to be it. Hope you guys enjoy. Drop a like on the video and let me know what you think of the build in the comments below. It really does help my channel grow, and I really do appreciate it. Definitely find yourself a Protuberance if you can, or use one of the substitutes that I mentioned in the video earlier. And most importantly, get yourself a good Dead Fang. Experiment with this a bit. It is a ton of fun to use. I've recently fallen in love with this class mod. And if you guys are loving the wedding invitation, then make sure you use the Dead Fang, because it really just is going to allow you to get the most out of that new amazing gun. So that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoy the gameplay, and I'll catch you next time.
Pocket rats.
You are the heart's breaker, Maurice the heart's taker. Take our back.
I like you better dead.
Break their hearts like a rotten foe.
Distract them. Go and meet death. I like your enthusiasm, beast.